We are going to start with one of the biggest stories we have been following for over a week now, and that is the escalating situation over in the Middle East. Bringing us out to this, it's a live image that we have in Tel Aviv over in Israel. As I read some of the latest reporting courtesy of the Associated Press. They say this, that Israel on Sunday struck southern Lebanon, Beirut, and an oil storage facility in Tehran as the war in the Middle East keeps escalating. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu promised, quote, many surprises for the next phase of this conflict. Not only do we have this live look out of Tel Aviv, but we also continue to have a live look out of Beirut in Lebanon, where out in the distance you can see a bit of smoke there. It has been dissipating for the past several hours. The AP going on to say this, that Iran also hit a desalination plant in Bahrain. And earlier on Sunday, Iran's foreign minister said a U.S. airstrike damaged an Iranian desalination plant on an island, warning that in doing so, quote, the U.S. set this precedent, not Iran. Such infrastructure is critical for drinking water supplies in the parched deserts of the Gulf. And an Israeli attack on an oil storage facility in Tehran sent up pillars of fire that could be seen by some video courtesy of the AP as a glow against the Saturday night sky. It appeared to be the first time a civil industrial facility has been targeted in this war. Now, the war, which erupted on February 28th after U.S. and Israeli strikes hit Iran, has so far killed at least, more than 1,000 people, 1,230 at last check from the Associated Press, and those deaths were in the Islamic Republic. More than 300 in Lebanon were also killed and a dozen in Israel, according to officials that are following this matter very closely. I do want to keep us on this live image as we prepare to continue on this conversation with our next guest, so hang tight for just a sec. So as we continue to keep these live images here on your screen, again, this is out of Beirut in Lebanon. I want to bring into the conversation now just to discuss all of these latest developments. David Daoud, he is with the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, and he has been following these developments very closely. David, good to have you on today.
Thank you for having me on.
So I did give a bit of a recap there right off the top of some of the things that we had been following for the last several hours. What really stuck out to you, and what really, out of all of those developments, could possibly change the trajectory of this entire conflict?
Well, I think, first of all, I mean, the very fact that Hezbollah joined in this conflict, given its domestic constraints, given the fact that, I mean, just over a year ago, they got out of a war that they got, they fell into. They didn't really expect their intervention in the Gaza conflict to turn into a full war. Decimated their political leadership, decimated most of their arsenal. And yet we find them again starting a conflict with the Israelis. And this suggests to me that they're sensing that the Israeli-American war in Iran is heading in a direction that's going to threaten the regime's existence. Otherwise, why risk the predictably furious Israeli response and the equally predictably furious response from Lebanese, or again, dragging them into a foreign conflict? The one thing that could really change this trajectory is if the United States and Israel stop the war prematurely for whatever reason, if President Trump accepts any Iranian offer for negotiation, some kind of off-ramp that allows the regime to preserve its existence, lick its wounds from this conflict, preserve its existence, but then return back to the same behaviors that led us to this point to begin with.
I want to put up next here, it's a map of the region, just to give our viewers a bit more context as to some of the surrounding countries. Now, this conflict, David, as you know, it appears to be affecting multiple countries across the Middle East right now. How concerned are regional governments about this risk of a further expansion when it comes to the fighting?
Well, I mean, I think it's expanded as far as it can already. Where there are attacks on the Gulf states, there's attacks in Iraq and Jordan, and Iran is saying that it's only attacking U.S. assets in these countries. But really, what they're trying to do, and it's first of all not true, right? We've seen footage of attacks on, say, hotels in the United Arab Emirates and elsewhere, and what they're trying to do is kind of hit the soft underbelly of American regional power. The Gulf states are prosperous countries. They're not, they've had a history of war war, say in Yemen, but they're not inclined towards fighting. They don't have that durability that say, or the endurance these say the Israelis have built up from unfortunately decades of experiencing war after war after war. And what the Iranians are hoping is this harassment of the Gulf states will lead them to effectively cry uncle. And given their influence with President Trump, given President Trump's proximity to the Gulf states, that they'll turn to him and say, President Trump, please stop this war in Iran. We can't take anymore. And again, that'll lead to a premature ceasefire that'll allow the Islamic Republic to endure everything that Iran is doing right now. I don't think they expect a genuine military victory in the conventional sense. They're trying to get what the United States and Israel to do to stop, because they want the regime to survive. Again, not so they can come to a real modus vivendi with either the United States and Israel or the regional countries, but so they can go back to the business of regional destabilization, proxies, building up their ballistic missile arsenal, and of course, going back to rebuilding their nuclear program.
As we talk a little bit about some of these goals that Iran still has here in terms of where they want this to go next, and given the rhetoric, what we've heard from both the U.S. and the Israeli governments, I mean, is this something that Iran could achieve just to keep the regime alive and to continue on operations as they were before?
Achieving the regime's survival actually isn't that hard. It's a harder lift for the United States and for Israel, given we don't have ground forces in Iran, given the size of the country, given that this is a regime that's had almost 50 years to build up organizational depth. It's actually harder to achieve regime change, to destroy the proxies, to eliminate all of Iran's pathways for resurgence, than it is for Iran to just maintain that bare thread that allows it to continue existing, at least the Islamic Republic regime, rather. And from there, look, then they'll wait until international conditions are more favorable. You know, maybe the current president becomes more preoccupied with domestic issues. The next president's not interested in the Middle East. They'll wait for an opportune moment. This is a regime that is defined by strategic patience. So if it takes 5-10 years, they'll wait for that moment when the eyes are off of them, and then they'll restart what they've been doing. So the goal now is just survive, and that's a very easy goal to achieve.
A lot of the conversation right now, or a lot of the major headlines, do follow these military dynamics, all of these military operations that are underway from all of these sides. But as we take a live look here out of Beirut in Lebanon, David, I want to talk a little bit about what we know given the humanitarian situation on the ground in several of these places that have been hit. I mean, what is the impact to civilians right now?
Well, we know that there's massive displacement. This war started with a massive and predictably ferocious Israeli response, as I've noted. But also the Israelis have issued several warnings now to the residents of South Lebanon. I think initially there were like 53 villages, and then they kept increasing the number. And then ultimately they said, all of South Lebanon moved north of the Litani River. Then this was followed by a call for the residents of Dahia. This is Beirut's southern suburbs, heavily Shiite area, effectively Hezbollah's nerve center in Lebanon. Move out of the area, move northward, move eastward. And then there were the areas of Baalbek that also, this is eastern Lebanon. There were calls for Lebanese to evacuate, Lebanese, again, Shiites, to evacuate westward. So basically move out of the areas where Israel alleges that Hezbollah has military assets, where it's operating. Now, the Israelis want to facilitate their military operations while minimizing the harm to civilian casualties. Hezbollah has a history of intertwining itself with the civilian population, intertwining its assets with the civilian population, which itself is a war crime. And the Israelis, what they're trying to do is say, get out of the way, guys, get out of the way, people, civilians, move out of the way, so we can, we don't harm you, and we can facilitate the targeting of Hezbollah assets. But ultimately, this is going to result in what we've seen, about 300,000, I think the estimate is, displaced Lebanese. I mean, Dahia alone, where the Israelis have called for evacuation twice now, has a population of 500 to 700,000 people. They've not all cleared out. but we're seeing reports of massive displacement northward from the south and already massive movement out of Dahieh. The Israeli campaign is slowly being ratcheted up. I think there's more of a focus on Iran now, and I think there's also an attempt to give these civilians an opportunity to move out of harm's way. But again, the ultimate result is going to be massive civilian displacement. But it's unavoidable, unfortunately, given the way Hezbollah operates within the country.
Talking about Hezbollah, but also going further with some more of these Iranian proxy groups. I mean, we've mentioned Hezbollah quite a few times within this discussion because they've really put themselves at the forefront in this fighting and as it escalates. As far as other Iranian proxy groups, what do we know about how they're possibly placing
Mhm.
themselves to also perhaps be involved in this fight as well?
Mhm. Well, it's natural that Hezbollah would put itself at the forefront. This has for decades been the tip of the spear of Iranian regional expansionism. Everywhere that Iranian influence has expanded, Hezbollah has been there first. If we go back to the Iranian expansion of its influence into Iraq, Hezbollah was there first in 2003, according to the Iraqi militias, to help pave the way for that. In Yemen and elsewhere in Syria, obviously, when the Syrian civil war happened, Hezbollah was the first to fight there to preserve Iranian interests at the expense of hundreds of thousands of Syrians. Now, the other militias, the Houthis have been relatively silent. They made some statements, but they haven't intervened in the conflict yet. I think they're perhaps being preserved for last. We've seen the Iraqi Shia militias begin their attacks. Not only that, they've also engaged in mutual reinforcement. A colleague of mine, Joe Truzman, and I, we are publishing a report on the Iraqi militias, not just saying they're coming into the fight to support Iran and the Islamic Republic, but now also, in light of the Israeli evacuation warnings and strikes in Dahieh, to intervene on behalf of Hezbollah. They're drawing a red line on Hezbollah. So there's this mutual support, this interest in mutual survival between the proxies to ensure, again, mutual survival, but also the broader survival of the resistance axis and the Islamic Republic of Iran.
This is just some video I want to point out to our viewers. This is from just yesterday. As I read the latest reporting, we know these strikes do continue. These are the images that we were getting out of Tehran there. David, we've been talking also about some of the biggest global concerns right now. I mean, oil markets, shipping routes, the safety of U.S. and allied forces in the regions. But from your assessment here and from what we're watching closely, what are some of the biggest concerns for those regional countries there as well?
Well, I think, again, ratcheting up the pain that Iran can inflict upon them. I don't think we've seen everything yet, unfortunately, from the Iranians. The goal will be to gradually ratchet up pain as long as this conflict continues, to get these countries to cry out even harder to say that they want the war to stop. In some ways, this seems to be backfiring, though. Just before I came on, unconfirmed reports as of yet, but I saw that the United Arab Emirates, rather than call on Washington to halt its combat operations and they have a peace treaty with the Israelis as well, rather than call on them to say stop striking the regime, we've had enough, they're engaging in attacks in Iran, which is unprecedented. I think what Iran is doing in the process of trying to save itself is actually proving the point that the Israelis and we, the United States, have been making for so long, that they are not just a military menace or a threat to the United States and Israel, but also to all the countries that surround them. This isn't a matter of a few historical grievances. Iran is pursuing an ideological goal that threatens the stability of all the countries in the region. And I think the way Iran is reacting with reckless abandon in some ways by attacking these countries around it is waking them up to see that they can't just rely on the United States and Israel to do the job. They may have to intervene themselves. And if the reports are true that Emirati forces are striking in Iran, this process seems to be underway.
David, you've been talking about this throughout this conversation, but for my final question, if you could just hone in for our viewers what they should understand about the broader implications of this conflict in the Middle East and also how it's having that greater impact on the international community.
Look, if the Iranian regime is somehow and I think we're far from there yet. Again, we could destroy Iran's military assets, we could degrade them severely, we could degrade their proxies severely, but achieving the regime's downfall, putting these proxies on a course of irreversible destruction or destroying them, we're still not there yet. But if that were to be achieved, the main regional destabilizer would be taken out of the equation. The main impediment to a lot of progress in the region. I mean, if you take Lebanon, which is the area that I focus on, look, Hezbollah isn't the source or the cause of Lebanon's problems, but it benefits from them so much that Hezbollah has become the main guardian of the corrupt system that has destroyed Lebanon through 1,000 paper cuts. Right? Lebanon is a country that is effectively a failed state. The economy is in shambles now. There's been deep economic crisis since 2019, and it is all the result of a corrupt political clique that is holding on to the country, some of whom are Hezbollah's opponents. But ironically, when the system is threatened, Hezbollah will even come to the defense or will join forces. We saw this in the last municipal elections. Hezbollah joined forces with its political opponents to help preserve this corrupt system, but this corrupt system is destroying Lebanon, again, through 1,000 paper cuts. We can apply this to Iraq. We can apply this to Yemen. Wherever these proxies exist, they're not interested in the prosperity of these countries. They're interested in self-preservation, and so often their preservation, because it depends on the weakening of the central states, because it depends on the lack of prosperity of these countries. Otherwise, they have no reason, right? The population has no reason to turn to these militias. They will reinforce or feed into or create the conditions that keep these countries corrupt, on their knees, lacking a path to prosperity, just so they can survive, just so they can promote Iranian influence and power in the region. So removing this regime and these proxies will set these countries, it'll give them the first, it won't fix everything, but it'll give an opportunity for this region to start on a course to move in a direction that is more prosperous and more peaceful. And personally, I hope we see that.
David Daoud with the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. We always appreciate your time here at Live Now from Fox just to break down this situation. We've heard from President Trump that he expects this is going to last for a few more weeks at least. So we'll be checking with you soon, to follow all of the latest. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to come back on. Thank you.
Of course.